my fantasy cover. It's not the first cover I made. Before I started as an indie author, I was a graphic designer specializing in book covers. It's not my first rodeo, but when you gotta grab the bull by the horns and it's for your own book, it's very hard to separate yourself emotionally and make sure that I'm designing a cover that is registering to my target audience and not just something I love. Trust me, in the past, I have made covers for my own books that did not preach to the choirs that I needed to sing and praise those books to. I wanted to make sure for this fantasy book, I hit the nail on the head. Here's the final cover. Kingdoms of Silent Sorrows is out January 20th, 2026. Mark your calendars and set those alerts. I really hope that this book just touches you in a way other books haven't touched you. Let me bring you back to the drawing board. I struggled with this cover unlike any other cover I have done before. Why did they change the photo app? Why Apple? I can't find anything. Boom. Let me go back to somewhat. That was very odd. I had this initial drawing. I wanted this to be the core of the cover. Then I started to continue to draw. I even tried something like this at one point with some mountains, swords, and elements that spoke to my fantasy readers. And then I was like, girl, less is more. Step back. That was not advice that stuck in the forefront of my mind. We got to a point where I knew I wanted the lettering to circle him like those medieval art history halos. I wanted the title, not just slam right in your face. I wanted it to be incorporated as part of the design. I even tried some colors and vibes like this because I don't know what I was thinking. Then I realized we're losing that concentration of the drawing. These were things that did not stay in my head. I got to a point where I was coming up with a design like this. I really liked the halo aspect. The target was interesting. I felt a little too masculine, a little like dystopian future, a little chilly, a little, dare I say, Cold War, if you know that graphic design movement. What is that called? What is the movement called with the Russian graphic design? Brutalist? It was a little brutalist, a little too modern, a little like we're pouring our kingdoms in cement. It wasn't the vibe that I wanted. I needed to speak more towards my fantasy readers. I needed to get down and dirty. Strip things down and speak back to the core of what I wanted the cover to be, which was the drawing. So I came up with something like this. I took out my magic wand, otherwise known as my Apple Pen, and I opened Procreate and I was like, girl, you need some fantasy font. We need to tell our fantasy readers this is a romantasy. So let's make some fantasy font. And I did. Why do you do it to me, Apple? Is anyone else losing their absolute shoo beans with the photo app? I just airdropped the picture that didn't show up where I wanted to show it. Now I gotta dive down Alice's rabbit hole and figure out where the tea party is being held. Okay, here it is. Brace yourself because Mama went overboard. We were not going on a little dinghy. We were going on a cruise ship of fantasy. The problem was when I put this into Photoshop and I went to put my author name and add the series title, I realized what I did. I drank too much Kool-Aid. And you know, you gotta drink water in there so you don't get hungover, because realizing that I put all this time into making the font and it was not gonna work, it was a little bitter pill to swallow. I gobbled it down, I stripped it down, and I went back to the core. I gave it a little sprinkling of that fantasy touch, but the core of the cover, which I wanted the readers to see, was this character, this emotion, and the line work of him coming undone, the weight of the crown just melting and seeping into his soul. I think we got there. If you are an indie author and you have to design your own book cover, let me give you the best tip that I feel like I can give you. Once you get a cover that you like, go to Amazon of your genre and the top list that you want to be in. Take a screenshot of that. Then take the cover you designed, shrink it down, and paste it on top. I did this before I finalized my cover, and I realized the colors I picked in my font, it was too tiny. You can see it here. It was not popping out. And if you'll notice, all the other competition have that weight of the imagery and the title. This was what I had, and it was not jumping out. You can then see that I put two different color ideas. Which one stood out more? I had these colors, a burgundy red with the blue. It just wasn't popping out. This was definitely popping out. You can have the most detailed, beautiful book cover, but this is how your readers are going to see it, tiny when they're scrolling. If your cover this size is not reaching out and causing eye drama for the reader to click it, it doesn't matter how beautiful your cover is. So always, always, always shrink your cover down and see how it's registering that way. This is something I always do before I give my mock-ups and everything to clients, and I even send them this little screenshot so that they can see and pick for themselves. That's my journey of making my own cover. I have more behind the scenes videos that I will post.